welcome to the session. So let's just check we've got people dialing in today. Where are you all calling from? Oh, all over the place. Great. So welcome to the first session of this series. We have run a previous session one, but this is the session one on Wednesday, the 24th September. If you didn't know what day it is, welcome to Wednesday. I will just put some details in the chat as well, so if you haven't already downloaded the session materials for this session, and if you want to follow along in Dorico, then please click on the session materials link that I've just put in the chat, and you can follow along in Dorico. You may alternatively wish to watch this session and then follow along later, because this session on exactly the same link is being recorded, so if you want to follow along later, then you can do that at any time, no problem. Come back and do that. If you're following along and something's too quick, you can press pause. Obviously, the chat will keep going, so it depends if you want to watch live or not. If you click on that session materials link, then you should find this page on our blog. So for session one, there is a note input Dorico file that you can download. You can either click on it and it will download, or you can right click and save as in some browsers if you need to do that. I've also done a notes file here, meaning you can take some notes. So it's a Word file that looks like this. So if you, a lot of the shortcuts that I'll be using in all of the sections today, they're all listed in here already, so hopefully that will speed things up a bit for you, so you don't have to be scribbling down what was the shortcut he said. They are already in this file. So if you want to download that Word file and then add your own notes and things to it as well, if you want to, no problem at all. The Dorico file will look like this. So if you open the Dorico file on your computer, if you want to follow along, it will look like this. And you'll also find that there's another file here about changing shortcuts. So as we go through this session, we'll be talking about some of the shortcuts that potentially you would want to change. There is a few things that you can make a bit more like finale speedy entry. So depending on whether you want kind of the simple entry style or the speedy entry style, that kind of thing, there's a PDF here you can download, which will list lots of the details of how you could change some of those shortcuts if you wanted to, where you would find those in Dorico and how you would do that. So your choice on that front. And in this session, really the aim is to tell you lots of things about the note input that you can do in Dorico, and so that you can pick the note input options that work for you. So whichever options you decide, yes, that works best for me, that's my favourite, that's what we're aiming to find out today, as well as lots of the things that you can do note input wise in Dorico. So I'm hoping you can all hear me okay, and I'm just going to have a quick check. As we go through each section, and there are quite a few sections, but don't worry, some of them are really quick. It'll probably be slow initially, and then we'll speed up as we go as well. So somebody is also saying they've got a constant echo, so hopefully that's maybe are you listening to it twice? Hopefully that's not something I'm doing. But yes, as we go through this session, I'll ask you kind of each section. Are we okay to move on? Are there any questions about that particular bit? Again, as I said, if there's any problems, with a file you can't access or anything else, then feel free to also just you can listen to this session and then come back to it later. So it's all recorded. So on that same link for the session materials, at the bottom there's the session recordings, so that we have done this session once before as well, and then there's today's link, and this will take you straight back to this YouTube video. So that session materials link that I've put in the chat will be most useful to you. You can get back to the recording as well as all of these files. So either click on the file and it will download onto your computer. Normally just in your downloads folder. It might depend on the browser you're using. In some cases people like to right click on it and do save as, and then choose where they want to save that file to. But I've got some people saying, yep, hearing okay, audio fine, so thank you very much, Peter, Shane and others on there, and let's get started. So Yeah, what we'll do is, as I said, we'll work through this Dorico file. So if you want to follow along with various things, we're going to go right from the kind of the very beginning of lots of the things that you can do in Dorico. So we're going to do some mouse input. We're going to use the computer keyboard. If you have a MIDI keyboard, then we'll also use one of those. So I have a MIDI keyboard here as well, and I'll be kind of using bits of both. So you'll be able to decide which option is it that works best for you. And on some days, maybe you want to use one option, some days you use another. Maybe you don't have a MIDI keyboard attached every day, but it would be good to know what the options are. So in this document, what we're going to do as we move through all the sections is there's a row of notes that are already input for you. And I'd like to say thank you to my colleague Marcus, who did the job of setting up this file and all the examples and the order and everything else. So thank you very much, Marcus. So this row here is kind of the notes that we'll use as a reference, and then underneath on every single section there is a blank or some notes that we will use, and we'll use the second one in each case to then kind of copy that example and find out how we do that. So any questions initially? There is one. I'm running Dorico Pro version 5. That is absolutely no problem for this masterclass. I don't think there's anything I'll be doing today that you can't do in version 5. So yes, no problem at all on that front. In fact, also previous versions. There are a few differences, I suppose, as you kind of go into older versions, but no, if you're using version 5, no problem whatsoever. Let me just check. I don't think there's anything else in there. So like I said, I will try and keep an eye on the chat. If I look that way because I'm looking at the chat, it's not because I'm not paying attention. It's because that's where the chat is. So right, let's get a move on. So when you start with this and you've got this file open in Dorico, and if you've downloaded it to your computer, you can probably find it just from the file open and choose it from there. And you can choose the file. But on most people's computers, once you've installed Dorico, if you just double click on that file that you've downloaded from the session materials site, then it will just open in Dorico anyway. So I'm presuming you're at this point. Now, actually, even playback doesn't really matter for this session, although in some cases you might find it useful. So if, just as a quick kind of bit at the beginning, if you find for some reason when you choose a note that you don't hear it, and in my particular case, you're not necessarily going to hear the notes on my screen because that might be annoying while you're doing things as well. But if you can't hear your version at your end, then you might just want to go to the Edit menu and go to Device Setup. And in Device Setup, you can choose the output here. It's called the ASIO driver, but you can choose the output. And you may have more than one option listed here. Basically, Dorico isn't necessarily going to pick the default output that you're using for YouTube or anything else. So when you choose the ASIO driver option here, then that's basically picking the output that Dorico will use, because it might be that you want to use one output for YouTube and a different one for Dorico potentially. So this is where you would choose that. There's also a stereo output option. In some cases, if people have complicated setups, they'll have more than one output listed here. So it just gives you the option of choosing that one. If you're in a more complicated studio setup and you have an audio interface, you might have other outputs you can choose. The rest of it is normally fairly self-explanatory. There's not normally much you want to do. If you're having any issues, then you should find there's a Steinberg ASIO driver in here on Windows, and on a Mac you're probably using the built-in audio unless you have a specific audio device like I have in my particular case. So that's how you get sound out of Dorico basically, and then you press close and it should generally work. If there are any other issues, then let us know either in the chat or you can email us on actually the best one's probably discoverdorico@steinberg.de. So you might have had an email from me today about a session. You can also reply to that. Or email discoverdorico, which is all one word, @steinberg.de, and I can send you links to help materials, or let me know what the problem is, troubleshooting things and that kind of thing. So let's go. Yes, if there's a couple of people saying, well, if they're having problems with the files or Dorico when open, then email me, let me know. We can sort that out for you. Don't panic. Right, let's. It looks like a couple of you are spotting each other as well in the chat. So it's nice that you've got friends on the chat as well. So with the very first session we're going to do up here, on the very first section in here, is inputting with the computer mouse into the staff. It says Windows Mac only because in some cases you might be using the iPad version of Dorico. I am going to presume in most cases you're not, but this second section down here will also be relevant for iPad if you're using Dorico for iPad. So with the computer mouse, now this isn't the quickest or most accurate way of entering notes into Dorico, but it is an option that a lot of people use, especially at the beginning. So to enter notes into Dorico, if you either click on the staff down here, so this second blank one, you can either click on it once and you'll end up with that rest selected, and when you click away from the staff, then it will be not selected anymore. So if you click on the white space here or up here, then it will be deselected, or even the white space between the staves. When you click on the staff, then it highlights that rest in orange. You can also double click if you want to, and if you double click, then you get the caret line started here. And you also have this little ghost note. Now to turn this off, because now if you start clicking around, this little ghost note is going to start entering notes for you. So you can click on the staff, for example, here for G, and then you could click down here for another note. However, you've got a quarter note here because by default we've chosen quarter note for you on the left-hand side. So if you want an eighth note at this position here, you can choose eighth note with your mouse, and then you can use the ghost note to see where it is you're going to position that, or the shadow note as we call it, and you can click on the staff at that point. And you can see also here there's a rhythm grid here, so it's showing me the strong and the weak beats on the bar. So even if these notes above weren't there, I could tell where the eighth or quarter note positions are in the bar. So I can now choose a quarter note here, and I can position that I want a G, don't I, just there. And then I can choose another eighth note, and I can position that down here. Now I don't need to enter any of these rests in the middle because we've got the rhythm grid and it's showing us where the beats are. I don't need to enter rests. There is a rest button over here, but generally it's slower to do that than it is just to put the notes in. So I can just now carry on clicking in these notes with my mouse like this. If you make a mistake, you can also press undo. There is an undo button at the top right hand corner all the way up here. Or Control Z or Command Z is also your undo shortcut, as it is in many programs. So there's an undo button up there. So if you make a mistake somewhere, you can delete things or you can just press undo. So I'm going to enter some more notes here. So I'm going to skip over this rest because I don't need it. I'm then going to switch back to eighth notes here, and I'm going to put a note in here. Now, like I said, this isn't the fastest or the most accurate way of doing notes, but it is a way that people often start with. So we thought we'll start with this at the beginning, and then we will move on to some of the other methods. And then I want a half note here. If I say crotchet or quaver or anything like that today, hemi, demi, semi-quaver, then my apologies, I'll try not to. When you hover over these notes as well, it also labels them. So there's your hemi, demi, semi-quaver, and here's your semi-quaver, but I'll try and remember to say 16th note and 8th note today. So I've got this, now because I've got this ghost note or shadow note kind of appearing, and I now need to click to stop note input here. So I can't just click on the white space down here necessarily because it might enter a note with really low ledger lines. So what you can do is you can either press escape on the top left of your keyboard and that will turn it off, or you can press the enter key. So on your computer keyboard, if you press escape in the top corner, that will turn it off, and also the enter key. My enter key might be a slightly different shape to yours, but the enter key down here. Now when I press enter again, that will also turn the caret line on. So you can use enter commonly to turn the caret line on and off, or you can turn it on with enter and you can turn it off with escape. Sometimes, I also said, of course, you can double click on the staff as well here. So if you double click, then that will also turn the caret line on, and you could use enter to turn it off, or escape to turn it off. The only times you can't use enter to turn that on actually are if you've got things like a meter selected here or a key signature. Then if you have these selected and you press enter, it will actually edit those, which is not something we're doing today. So it's okay for the notes and the staff. You can commonly just use enter. But in some cases you can double click. There is also another shortcut for it. I know you don't want to learn all the shortcuts today, but just in case you needed to know, Shift N. So if you've got a note selected and you press Shift N for November, then that will also turn the caret line on. But I would commonly use just double click or use enter to turn it on. I'd probably use enter to turn it off as well, or escape. So that's using a mouse. Now, I normally don't use a mouse with Dorico, so I'm going to turn mine off. And I suggest at the moment you do as well, partly because it means you won't accidentally get notes appearing on the screen somewhere where you don't want them. It saves kind of accidental notes, accidental things happening, and using undo a lot to turn those off. So I'm going to turn it off. And the way I'm going to do that is just by pressing the arrow key up here. So this little arrow button, which is in the top left corner of Dorico up here. And if you choose that, then when I double click on the staff here, I now don't have my little shadow note. I can't input notes with the mouse, but it means I can easily click somewhere and without affecting anything else. So I can kind of I can move somewhere else if I need to, and I'm not accidentally entering notes. Because the mouse I don't find is the most accurate way of entering notes either, and I'm not using it, then I've turned it off. There is also a general preference for that, so if you want to turn it off all the time, then in either the Dorico preferences on Mac or on edit preferences on PC, you can turn off the mouse input if you don't want them. So let me just have a quick check. There is a question about the iPad version, and we're about to use the iPad option as well next. If you purchase the iPad and the computer version, do you have to purchase both? They are separate purchases. Commonly, people probably have the desktop version. On the iPad, you might even just want to use the free version on iPad. So you can just download the free version and try that out. Maybe you just use it occasionally and use it with the large version. But the two purchases are separate. Basically, you'll probably have purchased Dorico via one method online, but if you're on the iPad, all the purchases go through the Apple ecosystem. So it is a separate purchase. It's available as a subscription because that's the way Apple like to do lots of things these days. There is what's called a lifetime unlock as well. If you decide you really like it, it's really what you need, then you can use that option instead of paying monthly. But it's not a very large monthly cost. I think it's about the same as a coffee. And you can optionally turn it off for a month when you don't need it and that kind of thing. So it's a useful option to have. Yes, enter is return. Apologies. On my keyboard it says enter. It might say return on your keyboard. There's a common language divided by a pond, isn't there? So yes, sorry about that. And are we supposed to have Dorico open? If you want to, yes. You can follow along if you want to, and I'll try and give you all the details to follow along, either now or, like I said, this session's recorded if you want to follow along later. So no problem. Also, I noticed Mark Larcher is on the call as well, so he's answering some questions. So thank you very much, Mark. That's very useful. So I'm going to carry on. Somebody said enter on the numeric keypad starts play. Yes, I'm not using the numeric keypad over here on my keyboard. I'm just using this enter or return key here. Yes, the enter key on the numeric keypad, which is over here, this can do different things. You can set it to do the same thing. You can change our shortcuts if you want to, but we're not using that one. Yes, good point. We are using this one here on the main part of the keyboard. You'll notice I have a split on my keyboard as well. Oops, apologies, I've just hit the space bar. I have a split on my keyboard as well. That's just for my benefit for typing. Obviously, you probably don't have a split in the middle of yours, but other than that, everything should be in the same places. So we'll move on to the next section, I think. Somebody's said I'm going a bit quick, and I can't find the 8th rest. You don't need the 8th rest. When we were entering the notes up here, we were just choosing notes. It was skipping over the rests, and I'm going to do the same again in a minute. So if you'd like carry on with the next section, you can always, as I said, go back to some of the other ones, some of the other sections if that's useful, or the whole thing, because the whole thing is also recorded. So now what I'm going to do is entering notes using the on-screen keyboard. And by this, I mean that there is a keyboard you can display on the screen in Dorico, which is a musical keyboard. At the bottom of the screen, so if I go down to the bottom of the screen down here, there's a little arrow in the middle, and if you click on that, or if you use the shortcut Control or Command 8, and I'll show you what I mean about the shortcuts I've given you. If you have the shortcuts file open as well, we talked about the mouse input. Now we're using the on-screen keyboard option for section 2. So this is section 2, and it says you can also use Control or Command 8. So Command 8 is the Mac one, and Control 8 is the PC shortcut. And what that does is, if I go down here, when I hold down Command and press 8, then it will show and hide the lower zone here. So, and it does exactly the same as pressing this button down here in the middle. So that also shows and hides that lower zone. And in this lower zone, there's all sorts of, there's a properties panel and all sorts of things. But on the left-hand side here, just next to my head, there's a keyboard button. So if you choose the keyboard button, you have a piano keyboard here. Now, this I think is more useful if you are using the iPad version of Dorico. Some people do like it visually anyway. If you have a Microsoft Surface or a touchscreen device, then this keyboard may also be useful to you. On my Mac in particular, it's not terribly useful. It's not something I use a lot personally, but some people might like this option. On the right-hand side over here, you can resize this keyboard. So there's a button over here where you can just resize it if you want to make it larger or smaller. And then you can use this to input notes. So if you were using the iPad and your finger to enter notes on this, you can start over here. I'm just going to double click over here. So I'm going to say I've double clicked over here. This is where I'm going to input these same notes, but I'm going to use this piano keyboard instead. We've got C4 here, which is middle C. If anybody likes to change middle C to C3, you can do that, but we're going with the defaults, which is C4 in Dorico is middle C. And then you can go, because it's a long way to go all the way up here to choose these note values on the left. There's another set of note values here. They do exactly the same thing. When you choose one, it also changes the other one. But because if you're using a touchscreen device, it will be a long way to go over here, we've added another set of notes here. So now I've got a quarter note chosen, I can just enter a note like this. Now, you can also then move along this rhythm grid. So we want to basically enter this rest, but we don't need to enter rests, do we? But what we do want is to move along by just an eighth note. So I'm going to choose eighth note, and there is a button here which will just advance the caret along. If you have an iPad or a computer keyboard, then you can also use the spacebar for that. So I'll show you that again. If I just undo that for a second. Undo that. So we've entered the first note, and now I'm going to choose down here eighth note, and I can just press the space bar, and it will advance the caret along by an eighth note, or I can use this button. You can also use the arrow keys. So if you prefer the arrow keys on your keyboard down here, you can just use these to go forwards and backwards, and it moves along the same rhythm grid. So you see here's the rhythm grid here. So you have arrow keys that you can just move along by eighth note to get to where you want to be. Then you've got eighth note chosen, and you can press the next note. So you can use this either with these on-screen buttons, or if you have a keyboard, then you can use the computer keyboard as well. But on an iPad, not all iPads have a keyboard. Some of them do, some don't. So depending on which device you have in front of you, which options you prefer, you can use those. So arrow keys, this advanced button, spacebar. You don't have to remember all of them, just remember the one that really works for you. So we'll choose eighth note, we'll move that caret along as if we're using an iPad, and then we'll enter the next note. So now, because eighth note is still chosen, I can just click on the keyboard, or if I had an iPad, I could click on the screen and I could enter those notes. Again, I don't need to enter these rests, so because I'm going to move on by a quarter note, I'm just going to press my advance caret button, and then I'm going to do exactly the same thing like this, and choose the next one. Now, I wouldn't say this is the fastest method of entering notes either, but it is one on an iPad that actually is a fairly quick method. Oh, that was my mistake. Apologies. Let me just undo that. I shouldn't talk and type, should I? It is a method that on an iPad works very well because you're using a touchscreen device and just using multiple fingers to do that. It can work very well. I'm just going to, at the end of here, I'm going to press escape, and I'm going to turn the caret line off so I can move to the next section. I will just check in the chat briefly. Bear with me a second. Here we are. How do we... Okay, yeah, that's a good question. So on the rhythm grid appears automatically. I'm just going to go to section 3 here, and double click here. The rhythm grid automatically appears, and I think for most, if not all of this project, we'll just need eighth notes. There is an option to change the rhythm grid if you're working in 16th notes, so since somebody just asked, if I just turn my camera off for a second, down here in the bottom corner where my face was, hello, you've got an option here where you can change the rhythm grid. So you can change it to 16th notes, for example, and now you've got a 16th rhythm grid. But at the moment, we only need eighths, so it's not really worth it. It's too many button presses. So I'm going to change it, and eighth notes here on the rhythm grid is your default. So hopefully that'll be useful. Let me just check for a couple of other questions. Space goes forward, that's cool. How do you go back one if you go too far? So if you're using a computer keyboard, you can also use the arrow keys to move along the rhythm grid, or you can press undo. So if you press Control Z, that's undo, or the button in the top right hand corner is also undo. So I would probably, if I've moved on slightly too far, I'd probably just use the left arrow and move back along the rhythm grid. You're all jumping ahead. This is brilliant. Are there shortcuts to move between quarter, eighth, 16th? Of course. And that's exactly what we're going to do in a second. Let me just check. Yes, contraflutist, I'm going to answer that exact question about when you sometimes get dotted notes. Don't worry, we will cover that one as well. And how to get a system break. Somebody would like to set up exercises for students not quite sure how to get a system break, would like to do a similar option to this today. I'm not going to tell you today how to set up this file, unfortunately, not in great detail. The basic gist is that in Dorico you can use a system called flows. I'm just going to quickly show you in setup mode. You can see all of these individual flows down here. So there is a button over here to add a new flow, and that will add a new independent section of music, and we've just created lots of them which are 4 bars long. You can also choose one and you can right click and you can duplicate a flow if you've already set one up. And so by default, with the way we've set this document up, every flow happens to be 4 bars long, happens to have 2 instruments in it, 2 treble staves. And then they will automatically lay themselves out across the page. Now, we have done some other formatting to this one, so yes, this is a worksheet style. Maybe we'll do another session on worksheets, and there are some older ones actually on our YouTube channel about how to do worksheets, but that's the basic gist. So this is not a system break at the end of here, just to answer your question. It's actually a new flow. It's like having a new independent section of music. It could be a new movement that's only 4 bars long. That's what a flow is. So I'm going to move on, I think, into the next one. Oh, somebody said if they added an extra measure by accident, how do I delete it? I would just press undo. I think if you press undo, then it will go away. And let's enter some more notes now, and then we'll answer some of the other questions. For example, people who've just said, "But I've added an F natural. How do I change it to a sharp?" Don't panic. We will definitely get to those. But if you had, for example, over here, you see when you choose a note on the left-hand side there are natural, flat, and sharp. So if you choose sharp instead, then you'll get a sharp. It's also available over down here on the keyboard when you're entering notes, of course. But as we're about to do, I don't need to say F sharp when I'm using the computer keyboard. So we'll do that as well now, actually, in this next section. Now, the important thing, I think, is when you're entering notes, let me just click this little arrow to get rid of that, or Command 8. When you're entering notes, because when you double click, you are entering new notes. So the things you're selecting over here will affect the notes you're about to enter. If you don't have the caret line on, so if I press escape, then I'm editing the things that are already here. So if I now go and choose this note, and I choose that it's going to be an F natural or an F flat, or an F sharp, then that's editing the existing note. But if the caret line was here when I choose these options, it would affect whatever I'm about to put in. Even if the caret line is on here, let's say it was here, and I press sharp, it's not going to make that note sharp because the caret line is on. It's inputting new notes, not editing what's there. So that's the important bit about the caret line. When it's on, you're inputting notes like this. When you turn it off, you're editing what's already there. So this is one of my most used, I think, inputting with the computer and or a MIDI keyboard. So we're going to be using this, and if you have one, the MIDI keyboard. You don't have to use the MIDI keyboard, but I'll show you ways of doing both. So I'm going to double click at the beginning here, and what I'm going to use is, instead of choosing the note durations here, somebody just asked are there shortcuts. You see when you hover over them, there's a little number appears, so it says quarter note crotchet equals 6. Now, in the notes file that I've given you, the Word file for section 3, These are the shortcuts for the note durations. And initially you're thinking, oh no, it's not the same as finale and it's not the same as Sibelius. And there's a good reason. And the reason is we wanted to make sure that we're not relying on the numeric keypad. So for example, in Sibelius and in some cases in finale, you would use the numeric keypad. You can use this numeric keypad for note input if you wish. However, a lot of laptops don't have those. In fact, even a lot of Macs that you buy, desktop like iMacs, they don't have that numeric keypad, so we can't rely on it for note input. So if you want to use it, you can, no problem. What we can rely on is you having a row of numbers across the top of your keyboard. So what we've done is we've said that a large duration over here is a long note, is a big number, a long number if you like, and a short note is a little number. So the idea is if you've got your finger on button 6 and you move to the left, you get a shorter duration. If you go left, you've got a shorter duration. And you can do that without looking. So I've got my finger on 6. If I look somewhere else and go to 5, if I go to 5, I'm away from the microphone, then I know I'm on a shorter duration. And if I go right, then I'm back on quarter note. So the idea is that you can touch type basically with your left hand on these notes. On these notes, on these note durations, and then with your right hand, you can either use the letters A, B, C, D, E, F, G, and I often do this, so I've got one hand underneath, which is no problem at all, or I commonly have a MIDI keyboard, so I would use the note duration here and the MIDI keyboard here. Now, if somebody's saying, well, hang on a minute, in finale, I was also using the arrow keys for things, we'll come on to that in a minute, don't worry, that is section 4 down here, we'll do that in a second. What I want to show you is how Dorico is set up by default first, and then how we change things. So by default, these are your note durations. I would try them out because I think they really work. I've previously used finale and Sibelius, and I've completely adopted the Dorico way of doing things, but everybody's different. That's what this session is about, making sure you get what you need. So these are the defaults. Let's use the defaults to start off with, and then if you decide you don't like them, we'll show you how to change them later. But these are the defaults. So if you don't have a MIDI keyboard, then you can use the pitches down here, A to G, letters A to G. You could also use the on-screen keyboard if you wanted to as well, that we've already used. And we're going to use these numbers for the note durations. So what I'm going to do, I just move this out of the way for a second. There we go. And what I will do here, so I've got the caret line turned on. So I'm going to say, I've already got 6 chosen, which is quarter note, and I can press G here, and then I can press 5, and with my thumb, I'm just going to press the space bar, and that's going to move the caret on by an 8th note. So 5 that I chose the 8th note, and then I've moved the caret on with the space bar. So you can use the arrow keys, like I said, but I'm not at the moment. So now I'm going to say I want a D, and then I'm going to say 6, and I want a G. And then I'm going to say 5, press the space bar for the rest, and then I'm going to press D again. So now I've got that selected, I've already got 8th note selected, I can just say G, D, G, B, and when I press D again, 6, when I press D again, then it will jump to the next closest D to the one I was already on. We will look at how you change the pitches and things and how you move notes around, no problem, but I'm just entering them for now and I'm using this method. So now I'm going to press 6 and move on. And for the next 2 bars, I'm going to use the MIDI keyboard because I've got one. So I'm going to press 6, and with my left hand, I'm going to press C. I'm going to press 5 and the space bar because that will move on by an 8th note. And then I can enter an 8th note because it's already using 8th note. And then I can press 6, and I can press 5, and then 7 to finish. So it's a very quick method of, I think, of entering notes this way because you can use your left hand on these numbers, and I'm a much better keyboard pianist with my right hand for inputting pitches that way. Obviously, with a MIDI keyboard, also entering accidentals is quicker, and so is entering chords, much quicker as well. So this is kind of one of the default options you can then use in Dorico. I will say, as well as this session, and we're going to go through lots of things in this one, there are also some other resources and guides we have. So if you're looking for kind of even more shortcuts and options and that kind of thing, then we also have a getting started guide, which is called the First Steps Guide. I'll just put a link in the chat at the moment. And the Getting Started Guide is another complete guided lesson. Either you can do it as a video or a PDF with shortcuts and all those kind of things, and it will teach you all of the things there as well. So there are lots of resources available. There's also recently a session of videos done by Jason Lafredo, who did the Conquering Finale series, and he's now doing some Dorico videos as well, where he has Finale and Dorico open side by side, and he's showing you the differences between them and where you can find things. So there's lots and lots of other useful resources. Now, talking about Finale kind of options, what I've been doing here in section 3 is we're entering notes, but I'm choosing the duration first and then I'm entering the pitch. So I'm choosing quarter note and then G at the beginning. And what many people like to do previously is you would press G and then quarter note. So that's pitch before duration. And yes, David and Rachel Burden, you can play the tune in. Guess what? That is section 5 in a minute, but we'll do section 4 first. So into the pitch before, so this is the kind of the quick entry option, if you like. So if I double click on the staff here, exactly the same as I would have done before to get the caret line on here. What I'm then going to do is there's a button up here on the left hand side, and the shortcut for it is K, and that will turn on pitch before duration. So if you do that, K for keyboard if you like, but when you press K, it toggles on and off the option for pitch before duration. So now, for example, if I press G on my computer keyboard, you get this little shadow note. It's not the mouse one that we were using before, but I get this little shadow note, and now you can enter that as a quarter note. So I've pressed G first, and then you can say quarter note. Now, you can also, like I said, you can use the arrow keys to move left and right. So if you want to move to the right along the rhythm grid, you can then move to the position where you want a D, and you can say you want a D, and then press 8th note. So if you prefer thinking that way, G, quarter note, then you can do that. Use the arrow keys to move along with your right hand, and over here you can say D, 8th note. Now, maybe a downside is when you're entering lots and lots of 8th notes like this, is that you've now got to keep pressing, G5, D5, G5. So, sometimes you might want to do that, but you can also press K and toggle this option on and off if you don't want it right now. And what you can do here, of course, also is use a MIDI keyboard. So if you play notes on your MIDI keyboard, if you're not quite sure which pitch you want, this method is really useful. Because if you were writing a melody, but you weren't quite sure which key you were in, or you were just experimenting, or you're playing chords or anything else, those would also all appear at just as shadow notes without anything else happening until you say, that is the right pitch. There we go, I'm now going to enter it. So you can use your hand on the computer keyboard and one hand on the MIDI keyboard, and you can do it that way as well if you want to. You can still move around using the arrow keys if you want to. You can still use the spacebar if you want to as well in many cases. So you still have lots of similar options, but this is the pitch before duration option. And if you like that option, you can toggle it with K to toggle this option on and off, which is this button over here. But there is also a preference in the Dorico preferences again. So in Dorico preferences, or if you're on a PC, it's in edit and preferences. And for note input and editing, there's a section here about pitch and duration, and by default, do you want to specify the pitch before duration or after? These are the defaults, but you can also do before duration if you want to and set that as your default. So next time you start Dorico, that's the option you'd get by default. You don't have to think about it anymore. It just works that way. There's also options for when you're specifying accidentals. Do you call it C and then press sharp, or do you press sharp and then press C? So you can decide if you want to do it after inputting the note or before inputting the note, and the same with rhythm dots. We'll come on to rhythm dots and articulations in a bit as well. So you can set these as your defaults. In Dorico, there's lots and lots of things that we've set up as a default, but that doesn't mean it has to be. You can then change these preferences to suit your own needs and the way you prefer working. So my personal preference is to leave the Dorico defaults as they are, but to use K when occasionally I'm working out what the chord or something is that I wanted, and then I can input that note. But commonly, I would use the duration before pitch option in my particular case. Let me just have a look. It was easier to enter rests and finale just tapping the duration, but it's quicker in Dorico because you don't have to even enter the rests. You don't have to think about them at all. Just move around in the bar. If you want to put a note here in the bar, you don't have to put any other rests in first. Let's say on beat 3.5, you want to enter a note. You can just say, I'd like a note here, please. And you don't have to have entered any of these other rests. It will just put the note in for you, no problem. So Pros and cons, there is a rest button. If you really, really, really want to spend the time entering rests, there is over here on the left-hand side a button for rests. The shortcut is comma. If you want to enter rests, you really can do, but you generally don't need to, and it's much quicker not to. So give it a try, but the option, like I said, the option's there if you want it to enter rests. Now, when you're entering the notes like you do in Finale, what some people would do, actually, Chip, you've just said exactly the right thing. And Lucy, if you want to back up to the beginning, how do you set up playback? It was at the beginning of the session. Just rewind the session. You can watch that bit. Chip, how do you use the arrow keys? So when I press G here, and it's giving me a G, if that's not the right note that I wanted, on Finale you could use the arrow keys up and down to move that ghost note, that shadow note. In Dorico you see it moves between the different staves, which isn't what you wanted. So when you want to move this shadow note, in Dorico by default, and you can change it, hang on a second, you can change it, but by default, if you hold down Option or Alt, depending on if you're on a Mac or PC, it's Option on a Mac, it's Alt on a PC. If you hold down that Option key, now your arrow keys will move that ghost note up and down. And the reason we do that, and I'll explain completely why, is that in Dorico, when you've got a note selected like this, I can move the arrow key, I can use left and right, and I can select notes. And I can move up and down, and I can move to a different staff. So the arrow keys are all intelligently and intuitively doing the same thing. They're just selecting things. So the arrow keys are all doing the same thing. So when you want to move a note in Dorico, we use Option to move that note up and down. So we use Option and the arrows to move it up and down, because it's not a common thing you want to do, but maybe it is during note input, if that's the method you prefer. But we use Option for that. And the reason is that we also use Option left and right. You can move a note left and right in Dorico. So I'm moving it along the rhythm grid just by pressing the left and right arrow keys. Now, if you want to change that method, and you can, then if you want to change that method so that the ghost note, by which I mean this ghost note, you just want to use the arrow keys. You want to use your left hand maybe for the note durations, and you just want to move up and down with these notes. It's not the fastest method, but it is a method lots of people use. So if you want to do that, you can change our shortcuts, and that's where you should check out the Changing Shortcuts PDF on the on this session materials page. I'll just put a link to that in the chat again. Yes, it's exactly the same problem, Rita. On a PC, up-down arrows are jumping the staves. They will do, unless you change the shortcuts. If you change the shortcuts, and it tells you here how to change them, why you would want to change them, all those options, and you may also, the other thing you might want to change, because the other shortcut that you're then upsetting, it tells you exactly how to change them, what you want to do. All the details are in this file that you can download from the session materials file page. And that means that you would be able to then choose note values, MIDI keyboard or otherwise, use the arrow keys. I'm going to have to use Option because I haven't set mine, but you can then use the arrow keys to move the ghost note up and down if you want to. I'm not going to do that because it's not a note input method I commonly use, because I think it's a bit slow to have to move up and down and press the arrow keys a lot to move up and down. But if you want to do that method because you don't have a MIDI keyboard to hand, and it's a method that you use a lot, you can do that. Just follow that little PDF I've given you. It tells you how to change your shortcuts. Any questions on that, just email me about any issues you've got with that one, but you can change those if you want to. And tonality, yes, if you've missed a lot of things, the video is already being recorded. It'll be on exactly this same link. You can either go back to the beginning now and watch it, or come back tomorrow whenever you like on this exact same link. This session has been recorded. So if you want to recap all of this, no problem. For jumping octaves, somebody's just asked, bear with me, we'll get to that in section 6 in a minute. So you're just jumping ahead, no problem. So just to recap on this one, if you press K, then you can toggle the ghost note option on and off so that you can then choose your pitch, and then you can choose your duration. You can use the arrow keys left and right to move along, so you can choose your pitch and then you can choose the note duration like this. So if that's your favorite way of doing it, then you can use that method. If you want to change the shortcuts for some of those things, no problem, you can also do that. If you really don't like the numbers that we have, you can also change those as well. So if you want to change those, then let us know. But all of these options for changing shortcuts are in the Dorico preferences, and they are in the section for key commands. That's what we call our shortcuts. So for example, if you search for set note duration, then in here you will find in the set note duration section all of the shortcuts for crotchet, I know it's quarter note, and you'll find all the options for, well, you can even set really short notes if you want, but 64th notes, 8th notes, 16th notes, they're all in here. You can change these shortcuts if you so wish. You can also change them to use your numeric keypad if you want to. So if you're used to using the numeric keypad, no problem, you can change those shortcuts too. So the set note duration section of key commands. Moving on to section 5. So in real-time input via an external MIDI keyboard, if you have an external MIDI keyboard and you want to use it, with a metronome effectively to play the notes in, you can do this too. So at the top right-hand side of the screen, there's a red record button. So you first choose the stuff you want to record into. So I'm going to just click on this. I don't need to start the caret line in this case, actually. Just choosing the rest here. If I wanted to start in this bar, choose this one, but I'll choose bar 1. And then when I press the red record button, it will give me a click, and you can then record into those staves. There is a quick setting in the shortcuts file I've given you. In here, for the MIDI keyboard, there is a shortcut for recording as well. We will press space bar when we want to stop in a second. And in the library playback options click settings, this is where you can set how many bars counting you get. So library playback options click, so library and then playback options, and in the click section here, which is the default section anyway, there are various sections for the sound. I wouldn't change it, the other two are horrible. And there's a number of bars counting. So if you want a 2-bar counting, just change this setting. I'm going to leave mine on 1, partly for time. So when I choose this bar here, and I press the button for record up here, it will give me a 1-bar count in, and then I'll play it in. Actually, in my particular case, because of the zoom level I've got so that you can see what I'm doing, the screen will move to one of the other sections. Don't worry about that. I'm just going to record it in anyway. You'll notice you don't get any notes until you've pressed stop. Oop, apologies, I pressed play again. So I didn't get any notes until I pressed stop. And you can see from these notes that I've just played in live, actually, they're all fairly accurate today, which is quite a surprise for me, especially doing these live. However, this note at the end should have been a bit longer. Dorico does record all of the live MIDI data, and it is quantizing things. So for people who want to use this method, and maybe we can do some other videos on this, when you select one or more notes from here, you can also re-quantize later. So not going to go into this in great detail, but in the lower section there is a key editor. You can see all of the live MIDI data that you've recorded as well. You can tweak things in here if you want to, no problem. So for example, you can edit these notes if you wanted to. That note wasn't quite long enough, so it wants to be longer. For example, I can do that down here as well. But I can also re-quantize anything that I've chosen. So if you're used to using that kind of method, Dorico's very good at that kind of method, no problem, if you want to use it. I'm not going to go into a huge amount of detail on that one. Lots of other things we can do, but yes, if you prefer using that method, then we have also some other videos on it if you would like any more information on it. But the basic gist is, yes, you can choose a bar, press record the information in. If you have, for example, played much shorter notes than you intended, or it's showing you shorter notes and you wanted longer notes, there are also things like the edit re-quantize option. You can re-quantize the music at any point. So you can choose a really short note value, for example. So actually this is more like what I played. Or you can say, oh, I don't want that. You can go to re-quantize, choose a more suitable note value for the piece, and then it will re-quantize the music for you. So if you want to use that option, it's there as well. Yes, unfortunately, the screen does move slightly when you're doing that because it's showing you the previous bar, and this piece is so short. If you want to try this method a lot, I would maybe start a new document with more bars in it than 4, and then kind of record some options into there and have a play around with it. Or if you zoom out a fair bit more, then the screen won't move around as much. For zooming out, I'm using a trackpad on my left-hand side here, so I can pinch and zoom for the score. You can also use, there is a shortcut for Command plus and minus, but I wouldn't use that one. Just use Z and X on your keyboard. If you press Z, then the music gets closer, because as you're Zing, you're falling asleep and the music gets closer to you. And if you press X, then the music gets further away. So Z is you falling asleep and the music gets closer, and X goes further away. So you can use a 1-finger shortcut for that. There's also in the bottom right-hand side, if you prefer numbers, There's a series of numbers here of zoom levels, so you can set a specific zoom level here, as well as a plus and a minus button on the screen. So if you want to use these for zooming, then you can use those options as well. So yes, if you're going to do the live MIDI input bit, maybe zoom out a little bit when you're doing it, and then try it that way. Do I have a recommendation for a MIDI keyboard? No. Well, I do. Buy something that fits on your desk, or fits the space that you're using. So on my desk here, I wanted to have a MIDI keyboard that had a fair number of keys in a shortish amount of space, because just for doing note input, that's okay. So I'm okay using mini keys when I'm doing that. If I was playing properly, I would want full-size keys, but you can't get as many on your desk. When I'm traveling, I have a different keyboard, which is a thinner keyboard that doesn't need a power pack, doesn't have speakers on it, and I use that one for MIDI input. If I'm doing a lot of MIDI input and I want to use full-size keys, I plug in a keyboard with more keys, larger keys. It really doesn't matter. It's all to do with the size. Some people have very fancy setups with a keyboard that slides out underneath. A lot of people just have a simple option on the desk. So no, it really doesn't matter. If it's a USB keyboard, it will work. If it's a MIDI keyboard, even an old MIDI keyboard, you can still get an adapter from MIDI to USB and use that one. But I would say, even if you're not playing live, a MIDI keyboard is probably the fastest way of getting notes into any notation program, because accidentals, chords, and everything else are just much easier to use than any other method. Let me just have a quick check. There were a couple of questions. Can I use an EWI? You can. I have done. I'm a sax player. The only problem is you need two hands on an EWI and blowing into it, and then so step time is impossible because you need one hand on the other keyboard. But playing live, yes, you can do that if you want to. You can press record, play an EWI, play any of the MIDI device, play a MIDI drum kit if you want to. Doesn't really matter what it is. What is Z on Windows? Z, I suppose. The letter Z, the end of the alphabet. So yes, or it's when you're falling asleep. Cartoons, when they fall asleep, it always says Z, 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 Z. So that's what you press and the music gets closer. Let me just check. There are some videos on opening the program, and there's a series for Dorico SE which includes installing it, opening the program, and getting started from there. No problem. The next session we do of this one, so next week or Wednesday at the same time, we'll also be creating a little arrangement, and we will do that right from the very beginning of Dorico as well. This one's more about the different types of note input, and then when you've chosen your method of note input, you can use that next week when we do an arrangement. So you can watch later and also maybe join next week's session, but yes, no problem. So moving on, moving and correcting pitches. So if you've put something in and you want to fix it, and there were a couple of other questions about how to do some of these things before, octave jumps and that kind of thing. So if I choose this note here, I don't need to turn the caret line on. What I'm going to do is I'm going to use Option in my case, because I've not changed the default shortcuts. If I hold down Option, I can use the arrow keys and I can move a note up and down. Now, moving an octave is a big jump. So to move an octave, I'm going to use Option and I'm going to use Command. So Option, Command, hold them both down and use the up arrow key and it will jump an octave. Now, if you're on a PC, then that's Control and Alt instead. So Alt is your move key, Control meaning big. So Control and Alt and use the arrow keys and you can jump them an octave. You can also select more than one note. So the same in any other application. If you hold down Shift, you can select more notes. So if I select these two notes, then I can use Option Command or Control Alt on PC and move them both. So you can also do this with a range of notes like these. So all of these notes actually need to jump an octave. So you can use Option up and down to move them diatonically, and you can use Option and Command or Control Alt on PC, and you can move them by octaves like this. And if you need to move them chromatically, there is a shortcut for chromatic, so Option Shift also moves them chromatically. There we go. So you have various options for moving those. If the keyboard gives you the wrong octave, how do you change the octave from D5 to D4? Yes, well, so you could use this option retrospectively, or when you're inputting notes, on most MIDI keyboards, mine has a little octave switch thing in the top corner. So I only have 3 octaves on my MIDI keyboard. So if I accidentally enter something in the wrong octave, I can either delete it and do it again, or I can just select the notes like this, and I can use Option Option and Command on mine, or it would be Control and Alt on Windows, and you can move the notes an octave. You'll also see if you move them far enough, Dorico will move the staves apart for you as well. So you shouldn't need to do that, but yes, it can do that if you need to. But yeah, so there's your kind of basic options for moving things. So if it's just a few pitches you want to move, so this one, for example, I'm just going to press Option and press the up arrow, and this one only needs to move up once. I'm using the right arrow to get to the next note, and I'll move that one up to there. And there are other options as well for moving and correcting pitches. So let's say with these ones, I'm going to undo. Let's have a few more. Here we go. There's another option you can use. So you've got the correct rhythms here, but just the wrong notes, and we want to correct them to these. So what you can do is, if you turn the caret line on, I'm going to press Enter. I don't want pitch before duration. So I'm going to I've pressed Enter to get the caret line on. And now what I want to do is I don't want to enter any of the note durations for these. I just want to change the pitches. So if I press L, the letter L, then it gives me this little lock symbol here for lock duration. So now if I just play notes on my MIDI keyboard or my computer keyboard, then it will only change the pitch of those. But I don't have to enter any of the durations at all because they're already done. Oh, that was my fat fingers. Sorry, I just pressed undo. I'm trying to do this while talking, and of course I'm failing. So that's another option. You can use L to do lock duration. It's also useful if you've entered the notes for one instrument and you then want the a third below or a fourth below or something like that for the second instrument. You can do this. And enter new pitches that way as well. So that can also be a useful option in some cases. Like I said, there are chromatic options. So there are shortcuts for chromatic options as well. Now all of these, this is section 6. So on our shortcuts file that I've given you, Alt and up and down will move them diatonically. If you include Shift, then it will also move them chromatically. There's Windows and Mac shortcuts on here. And if you use Control Alt or if you use Command Option, then it will do octaves. So you've got options there for whichever one of those you want to use. We will be talking about ties, slurs, articulations, and dynamics if you scroll forward in this file, but don't yet. We'll get there. So accidentals and enharmonic reinterpretation. Section 7. So in here, if you want to input an accidental, for example, so I'm going to start entering a note here. I can say, if I say C, then I'll get a C, and I'm in the wrong octave, so I'll move it down. But I want it to be C sharp. By default in Dorico, the sharp, flat, and natural are over here. And if I choose them now, they don't apply to the note I've already entered. When we looked at the preferences earlier, if you scroll back a little bit in this session, then when we looked at those preferences, there is an option to enter the C and then do sharp. But by default in Dorico, what we would do is we would say sharp first. So we would say sharp, and then we would say C, and then we get C sharp, move it to the correct octave if necessary. So for the next one, we would say D, but we would say sharp first. So your sharp, natural, flat keys are here, but they are also on your keyboard, and I've added a little option here. They are 0, minus, and it's actually, there is a plus key on here, but it says equals. So if you look at your computer keyboard, you've got all of your note durations up to 9, then you've got 0, then you've got minus for flat, and the next key, which has a plus on it, is sharp, but it's actually the equals key, isn't it? So that's the shortcuts for them. So when I'm entering the notes over here, and I want to enter a D sharp, I can say sharp D, and I can say sharp F. And you could use your right hand if you want to and say sharp G. And then when you want flats, you can use the minus key, so you can say minus D, minus E, minus G, minus A. So you can do them that way. If you've got a MIDI keyboard, you can use that too. Let me just back up a second. So of course, accidentals are much easier with a MIDI keyboard because all you need to do is press the right note on the keyboard. However, it will depend if you're using a MIDI keyboard which key your piece is in, and at the moment this is in atonal. So you may get the wrong accidentals by default if you're using a MIDI keyboard until you put it in a key. We won't go into all the details of that this week. It is definitely something we're looking at next week, but just understand if you're using a MIDI keyboard, that can happen. So this particular method, the idea was to do this and to enter notes using the shortcuts. If you want to change a note, so enharmonically change it, then because it's a move function, you use your move key, which is Option, and you can use the same minus and plus keys. So you can say Option, and you're either moving it up or you're moving it down. So if I, from this A flat, if I hold down Option and press the sharp kind of direction, moving it up, it will actually go to a B triple flat. If I use the left option to move A down to G, then it will give me a G sharp. So this F wants to move up to G, and this C wants to move down to B sharp, and this one would move up to F flat. So that's kind of the direction of up. Oh, sorry, up. Oh, where's my hand gone? There we go. Up and down is kind of the directions you're kind of moving in with those two keys. So you can use Option and use the same two keys you'd use for sharps and flats, but you can that will enharmonically change things. But like I said, you will end up potentially either with double sharps or triple flats if you go even further. So it's not just a toggle switch. There are the other options there as well. Dotted notes. Oh, hang on. Bear with me a second. Oh, it wasn't a question, but that would have saved you a ton of time. Apologies. We should, if you come to the session little. No, I'm joking. It's fine. Now you know, so that's all good. Dotted notes. So I'm going to enter these notes as dotted notes. You could do them as eighth notes and then change them all to dotted notes. But let's presume we're going to actually enter them as this dotted rhythm. So by default in Dorico, you would press 5. Unless you've changed any of your shortcuts, you'd press 5, and you could press the dot. So the period key would be your dot. There is also in the interface here, you can press 8th note and you can press the dotted option here. And you could then enter that note. So if we then say C, oh, wrong octave, then we get a C here. And then if you were using the standard method, you kind of move your finger to the left and you would enter a 16th note. I'll use a MIDI keyboard. And you then enter that, and then you'd say 5. But 5, of course, is going to give you an 8th note. So what we did is we made it, because the full stop key, period key, is a long way from 5, and you'd have to keep moving your hands across the keyboard a lot. We decided that if you, well, this was a good idea from somebody else, if you double tap 5, so if you press 55, then it gives you a dotted note. You see the dot's already lit up here. It gives you a dotted note by default. So I can say E, and then I can say 4, as that's my 16th note. And then I can say 55, 16th note, dotted 8th, 16th note, dotted 8th, 16th note. So it's really quick to enter any dotted notes, any dotted rhythms using that method. There is another option actually, which is if you just say 8th notes and you enter all of these notes. Then what you can also do in Dorico, if I press Escape, so I'm not inputting any notes, and I choose the whole bar, so I'm just going to choose in the middle. As long as you don't click on a note, you click between any of the notes, then you will select all of the notes in that bar. And then if you just press dot, the period key, then it will dot the first one, and because the second one's already edited, it'll skip that one and move to the next one. So you'll actually get a dotted rhythm really easily. So any notes you've got where you want a dotted rhythm, you can do that. I'll just do that again for you, so I'll back up. So you enter all of these notes as 8th notes, you click in the middle of the bar or you select all of these notes in some way, and then you just press the full stop period key and it will make all of them dotted. So your choice. The same over here, if you want these rhythms, you could say that you wanted 66 because that would give you a dotted quarter note. However, Dorico by default is going to give you a tie. You don't need to worry about it because if you just press 8th note and press the next note, then it will carry on. And the reason it does this is that there are different rules, notationally, for whether or not, because the rhythm ended at that point and the rest of it was rests in that bar, or whether the notes continue. So if I do the next one and I press 66 and press E, then again I'll get a tie, but if I add the next note then it will fill that in. So there's lots of notation options for what will happen in various cases. We won't get into the detail right now, but they all exist if you want them in the library menu in notation options, and they are all to do with note grouping. So these are the various things in various options that Dorico will choose. There is an override function as well if you really need it, but these are all of the options that you can choose. So you don't need to spend a long time forcing and overriding individual options. You can set the default options in Dorico. And as I've said once before, there is only one set of preferences in Dorico, so if you want to change them, then you can change them and set Dorico for your preferences. It's just that might not be the default out the box. So that's what's happening there. So don't worry when the first one's wrong, just keep going, and it will continue entering those notes. In the same way, you could enter all of these as quarter notes, and then you could choose this bar and press the full stop, and it would dot and give you dotted rhythms. So you choose whichever way you work. I commonly prefer the kind of double tap method. So I would press 66 and then I'd press G either on a MIDI keyboard or computer keyboard, and then press 5 and then press 66 and then I would press 5. So that's the method I would use. We're just now double tapping that number, but you choose the preference you like. Some people like using the rhythm dot option because they know what they're doing. If you're using the numeric keypad over here the numeric keypad over here to enter your rhythms, you might have changed some of these shortcuts to be the same as what you're expecting before. Be aware that the dot here is a different dot key on your numeric keypad. You can change this one in the preferences to be the dot for dotted notes if you want to, but by default when you press that, it actually returns the play caret to the playhead to the beginning. So actually that's a playing shortcut, and that's why when people press this key and it was playing, that's what was actually happening. So what will happen is, because in some programs you press the dot to go back to the beginning and then press play, and it will then play from that point. That's what that dot is doing. It's resetting the playback. So in the preferences, if you want to change it, you can do that, but it won't happen out of the box. So if you want to change it, you carry on and do that. How to enter multiple independent voices into one staff. We will do voices, don't panic, we will do voices. Look, there is a section on triplets and tuplets and rests, and then various other options here, including voices, so don't worry, we will get to that one. Let's just do some things with tuplets, and then we will have a little break, just in case you need a comfort break for 2 minutes, and then we'll move on with the rest of the file as well. So don't worry, John, we will get to that one. Chip's asked and Mark has answered about double dotted notes. Yes, if you need double dotted notes, then you can press the dot twice. If you need to, you can press you can press Alt and the dot key for that. But if you prefer to do it on the screen over here, where you've got these dots, you'll notice on lots of these buttons there's a little a white triangle in the corner, which means if you right click on these, it also gives you other options. So you can change the dotted note to be double dots or even triple or quadruple. So if you just right click on the button, then you can change what that button is doing, which is also the same for tuplets that we're going to use in a minute. So for the triplets here, we're just going to enter some eighth note triplets here and then some quarter note triplets and look how they work. So in Dorico, I've turned the caret on here. I'm going to choose eighth note, so I'm going to press 5, but you could choose it with your mouse if you want to. And then I'm going to press the triplet button. There is a button on the left-hand side over here for triplets, so you can press that button if you want to. The shortcut, by default, is semicolon. So if I press the semicolon button, then it will give me this little thing which is called a popover. We use popovers for lots of things, for dynamics and meters and clefs and key signatures and all sorts of things, but this is the triplet popover. It pops over the top of the page, and if you want to move it slightly, you can grab these 3 little drag handles on the left-hand side, and you can move that up and down if it's in the way at all. So I'm going when I've opened this, it's automatically populated with 3, which happens to be the most common triplet, so that's what I would need anyway. So I'm just going to press enter so that's added a triplet. Now I can either use my QWERTY keyboard or I can use my MIDI keyboard to enter the 3 notes. So I'll use my MIDI keyboard and enter 3 notes. Now triplets are sticky in Dorico, they stay on until told otherwise. So this is a really easy run to do because you can just keep entering notes. And now I need to stop them. So now I need to stop the triplets. I can either click on the triplet button again over here, or I can press colons, which is kind of shift, semicolon. So the same button I used to start them with, but I add shift. So shift, semicolon will stop the triplets. The light has gone off on the button over here, so the triplets are no longer happening. So now if I press quarter note and press C, then it will just give me that note. So now I want to enter quarter note triplets. So I have quarter note already selected, or you can press 6. I'm going to start the triplets. I'm going to press enter because 3 is already selected in there, and I'm just going to enter those notes. And of course, because these are sticky as well, because they're just triplets, then when I want to stop them, I press shift semicolon, which is colon effectively, and then I can press the end there. So for triplets, you can just use that button to turn them on and off, the semicolon to turn them on, and colon to turn them off, and you can enter triplets. Now when you want mixed triplets, so different note values inside the triplets, you would start the caret line as always. This is actually 8th note triplets, so we're going to choose 8th note, so that's 5. I'm going to choose the semicolon, I'm going to press enter, and then the first note I want to enter is a quarter note, so now I can say quarter note, and then I can press C, and then I can press 8th note and press C. Now the same triplets are carrying on, so I can just press C and quarter note C and quarter note C and 8th note C, and you can do it that way. So even when the durations change, no problem. This next bar, however, these are not 8th note triplets anymore, they're quarter note triplets. So I need to end the previous tuplet, I need to choose quarter note, start again, and now I can enter these. So I can now say I want a half note G, I want a quarter note G, I want a quarter note C, and I want a half note C. So that's how you can do triplets when the note durations inside them are slightly different. Let me just turn the caret line off. If we just have a look at the notes section over here of the things I've written for you. So rhythm dots we have already done. Triplets, the semicolon is for the tuplet popover, and colon or shift semicolon will stop the tuplet. Mixed length triplets is basically the same, and then there's other tuplets that we're going to enter. So we're going to do these next. So all of these notes are available in that notes document for you, which you can download from the session materials page. So for these tuplets, now these are more complicated, so let's do some of these ones. So I'm going to start the caret here. I'm going to choose 8th note, so I'm going to press 5 in my particular case. So we got 8th note. Now when I press the tuplet button, what I actually want here is I want to enter 5 of them where 4 of them would normally fit. So it's not just a triplet, it's a specific ratio. So I enter it as a ratio. So I say 5 colon 4. I want 5 notes where 4 of them would normally fit. So if I press enter, now I've got a quintuplet, so I can now enter these 5 notes, and now I need to stop that one because the next one's a septuplet. So I then press stop, I start again, and this time I want 7 where 4 would normally fit. So I want 7 in the time of 4, 7 colon 4, and now I have a septuplet, so now I can enter those notes instead. Now I want to stop that one because now I want 16th notes. So I say 16th note, or you could, like I said, you can choose that over here if you want to. And now I can say I do want triplets. I do want tuplets, and I want 7 of these where 4 would normally fit. So now I can enter these. And then I need to stop that one because the next one is a sextuplet. So I want 6 in the time of 4. 6, there we go. And then I would stop that one if I wanted to do the next one, etc, etc. So you get the idea with those. Now also for buttons on the screen, I'm going to press enter or escape to turn my caret line off. Buttons on the screen. When you, in fact, let me leave it on for a second. I can show you the button over here on the left-hand side. You see this one now says 6 colon 4 because it's remembered the last tuplet I entered. So if you're using this button, it will remember the last one you entered. Also, this button over here has a little arrow. So if you right-click on it, you can also choose some common ratios from here. So you've got 2 in the time of 3, 3 in the time of 2, which is your standard tuplet. You've got 4, 3, 5, 4, 6, 4, 7, 8, and you've also got X, Y, and X, Y would just open the popover so that you can then type what you need. So if you prefer to use this button instead of remembering the semicolon shortcut for things, you can use that button, but you can right-click and choose various ratios from here as well, should you need to. So there are options on the screen if you want them, but commonly when you're entering, especially if you're entering anything like this where they're changing a lot, you'd probably use the popover for those. So there you go. And yes, somebody said it's a stopping the tuplet. So your tuplet key, semicolon, and you to stop them, it's shift and the same key, which gives you a colon. So if we go look in here, then the tuplet is semicolon, and there's also shift colon, which is in there. Also, when you're using these ratios, there are options where instead of just 4 in the time of 3, you can specify at the end that it's a quarter note. So when you're entering these ratios, if you've got, for example, quarter note selected here, but you're entering tuplets, what you can also do is say things like, I'd like 5 in the time of 4, and you can say, for example, Q for quarter note, you can say E for eighth note. So when you get that, now what you've got is, oops, you'll get eighth note. Sorry, I should have actually chosen eighth note, shouldn't I? That would make a lot more sense. So you've got actually get eighth note triplets. So if you don't like choosing the note value here first, let me just undo that. Then when you're entering the tuplet option here in the popover, you can specify the ratio here with the note duration in there. So if you prefer that way of working, you can say 5 or however many in the time of 4, Q, or E for eighth note, or X for 16th note, and there are some shorter note values here. So there are options there for tuplets. This is also covered in a video that Jason Lafredo's done, so if you would prefer that video or one of our other ones, then there's a lot more detail in those as well for options for tuplets. But hopefully that gives you a good idea. Let me just I think most of those have been answered by me or Mark. Thank you, Mark, for being fantastic in the chat for answering these. Let me go back. Can you clarify how you create an eighth note triplet group with 1 quarter, then an eighth? Yes, no problem. So we've got an eighth note triplet. So I'm going to pick eighth note first. So over here, we're going to pick eighth note. I'm going to press the tuplet button. So it's semicolon. And then you do want triplets, but you want to start with a quarter note. So now, before you put any notes in, you press quarter note. So 6 in my case, or click on it on the screen. And now when you enter the first note, you get a quarter note. And then when you press eighth note, you'll get an eighth note. So you're initially just saying what the tuplet is. It's a ratio of eighth notes. It's a ratio of 16th notes, whatever it is. And then inside that, you can choose what the rhythms actually are, if that's what you need. I pressed escape so that I've turned my caret line off. I'm going to go to rests and the rhythmic grid, if that's okay. So section 12, and then we will have a rest after section 12, and we'll have a little break for 2 minutes. So rest in the rhythmic grid. We talked a little bit about this before, but just to kind of hopefully clarify some of these options. So when you double click in the staff and you have your rhythmic grid here, the rhythmic grid by default is showing eighth notes. And somebody asked earlier about 16th notes as well, but you can change this rhythmic grid to be whatever you want. If you're only working in quarter notes, so that when you press the right arrow, you only want to move in quarter notes, then in the bottom left corner, I need to turn my camera off. In the bottom left corner, where my head was, down here, there's a little note option in the corner, and if you choose that, you can choose your rhythmic grid option here. So I can choose quarter notes. So now, when I press the right arrow on my keyboard, I'm only moving by quarter notes. So if I only want to enter this rhythm, I can then just say I want to C here, and I want, I'm in the wrong octave, and I also want to C here. So if you're working in eighth notes, then the default is to have your rhythm grid down here and eighth notes. There is a shortcut for changing a rhythm grid, but that, we don't want to do too many shortcuts today. So I can now move along in eighth notes. Oh, I'd selected quarter note, hadn't I? Apologies. So I can press eighth note. That would be helpful, John. Well done. And do that, and then say I want G and G. Now, you can also use an alternate method, which is we've got eighth note grids here, but we want to enter notes a 16th after this rest, and changing the rhythm grid every time would potentially be a bit slow if you're changing lots of options between lots of different bars. So another option is that I'm going to choose 16th note. So I'm going to choose 16th note on my keyboard here, and I'm just going to press the space bar. and if I press the spacebar, it moves along by that 16th note. You see on the rhythm grid, I'm between the two 8th note bits, so it's moved along by a 16th. And now if I say I want to enter that note, I'm going to press 55, C, and now I need to move along by a 16th, but my rhythm grid still isn't on the 16th, so I'm going to press 4, and for 16th notes, press the spacebar, and then press 55 and press C to enter the note I want. So again, I'm not actually entering the rest. If you like, you can think of using the spacebar as entering the rest. It's not actually, but it sort of is. So for spacebar, sort of enters the rest. Doesn't actually display on the screen, but that doesn't matter, because then when you enter the note, then it's okay. And now you just press the spacebar and G, and the spacebar is moving along by the selected note value, even though my rhythm grid is still set to eighths. So when you're changing a lot between things, you can change the rhythm grid if you want to down here in the bottom corner, and choose your options here. Like I said, there's a shortcut for it, but the spacebar will also move along, effectively entering a rest, if you like. It just actually leaves space. A good way of thinking about it, which Jason Alfredo explained the other day, is if you were to look in a DAW, or as they call digital audio workstation, or this key editor, down here, this shows you where the notes are, but there's no such thing as a rest in any of these. It's just space. The rests are just the space between the notes. So Dorico will normally put in exactly the correct rests for you that you need anyway. So you don't need to enter the rest. You just put the notes in where you want them, and Dorico will, in the space, it will apply the correct option. There are options to override, of course. If there are particular cases where you need to enter a particular rest, a particular note combination, that kind of thing, then they also exist. But in this particular case, you probably commonly don't need them. And especially when you're learning Dorico at the beginning, I wouldn't spend time putting the rests in as well. It'll be far quicker not to. A rest after the rests, indeed. So we will be doing in a minute section 13 with grace notes, but if you would like 2 minutes to grab some water or to let the dog out or anything else, then do that, and we'll be back very shortly in 2 seconds. So I'll just put the holding screen on, and then we'll be back shortly. So, okay. Right, I will continue. If you're thinking this is a lot to take in, then don't take it all in at the same time. Don't necessarily try them all, but understand, even at the beginning we were getting questions about how we do various other things. So I'm going to continue, and we can look at all of these note input options. Like I said, the session's recorded on this same link, so if you want to come back and review this as many times as you like, no problem at all. So the next section we're going to look at is section 13 for grace notes. If you're looking in the notes file, the Word file, then it also tells you for the shortcuts for grace notes that we'll use. So I'm going to double click on the staff here. And for grace notes, the shortcut is fortunately slash, because there's a little slash normally on the flag there and on the stem. There are, of course, grace notes without slashes as well. So when you right click on this button over here for grace notes, you can also choose unslashed or slashed, but the default is slash. So you can click on that button if you want grace notes, or you can click on the slash key on your keyboard. For me, the slash key is down here to the left of shift. That's where my slash key is. So when I press that, I can enter slash notes. So I can then say it's a 16th note D. Oh, wrong octave. And then if I hit the slash key again, it will turn the slash key off. So now I can enter the 16th notes, or I can use my MIDI keyboard if I wanted to instead. And then if I hit the slash key, then I can enter the 2 slash notes. I can turn the slash off and enter the next notes. I can hit the slash key. Now, in actual fact, I want 8th notes this time. So I'm going to choose an 8th note. You see, these were 16ths, and this is a tiny 8th note. So a tiny 8th note D slash will be like that. Turn the slash off. Turn the slash on and off. And then if you want 3 16th notes or more, doesn't matter, same process. Hit 16th notes, turn the slash on and just press 3 of them. Turn the slash off, and for some reason we've made this one tricky. We've also said we're going to do a 8th note triplet for the last 3 notes. There we go. So basically, the idea of this section is just to say slash is your grace note button. So if you press that, you can enter grace notes, and when you turn it off again, then you'll get standard notes as we've had before. If you're doing chord input without a MIDI keyboard, section 14. So chord mode, or chord mode as we would end up calling it, because the shortcut is Q for chords. So if you don't have a MIDI keyboard, but you do have a computer keyboard, of course, then you can press Q, and you see you get this little plus here on the keyboard. Sorry, on the keyboard. You get this little plus on the caret line here. So when you press Q again, it turns it off. You'll also notice there's a button over here on the left which is lighting up, which is for chords. So now, what would normally happen when I press letters on the keyboard is the caret would move on to the other positions in the bar. But in this case, it's not. It's going to build up the chord. So if all I need to do is press C, E, G. Oh, apologies, wrong octave again. I should stop using the MIDI keyboard because it's, yeah, anyway. So if I press C, E, G, then I've then got the chord. Now I need to move on because the caret's not moving on for me. So I do need to use the arrow keys now to move that on along the rhythm grid so that I can then enter the next chord, which is C, F, A. And then the one after that, of course, is B, D, G. So you can enter your chords this way. If you're out travelling, you don't have a MIDI keyboard, and you still want to enter chords, then you can do that no problem. There are also some other options for entering chords as well. So if, for example, if I turn chord mode off and I enter some notes, in fact, shall we? Yeah, let's just have the same one for a minute. Then there is also another option where when you select some notes, you can press Shift I for intervals. And you can say what you want the intervals to be. So if you want these all to be the same chords, you can press, for example, 3 in here and it would add a third. But if I undo that and I said I also wanted a minor third, you can press M3. So you can press a minor third. And you can also build up chords this way. So you can say you wanted, for example, a minor third. If you say comma 5, comma 7, then it will give you a minor third, a fifth, and a seventh. On top of all of those. So that's another way potentially of doing chords if you're doing it that way. You can also enter things like aug4 for augmented and other options, but generally I think what people will probably use is you just press Q and press the letters that you want on your MIDI keyboard. You can also use the ghost note if you want to, so if you've set your arrow keys to be your shadow ghost note and move that one, you can use that and build up chords as well, should you want to. Manual beaming options. I've not seen any more questions in the chat, so I think we're okay, and I'll move on. So manual beaming. So when you've entered these notes, you see I've got this little plus here now. I need to remember to press Q to turn off chord mode. I'm going to press 8th note, and if I was to put these notes in, so if we say, well, let's use the MIDI keyboard. So we've got these notes. This is the beaming I would get. Oh, sorry, somebody asked the shortcut for entering chords like Org7. So if you want an augmented, so it's Shift-I for that popover. And if you wanted an augmented, so like an augmented fourth, you can say Org4, and you'll get an augmented fourth above the note that was there. So just type Org4 or DIM for diminished. So sorry, I was entering these notes. So now when you're entering these notes, Dorico is grouping them how you would probably expect. So I'm going to say an 8th note rest and enter these ones. So you see at it's not doing the top option. So how do we get from this to this? So there are options where you can specify that the meter, the time signature at the beginning, is specifying the beat grouping. But I'm presuming in this particular case it's just one bar that you want to manually change for some reason. So you don't want the time signature to do it in every bar. You just want some specific options. So what you can do in this one is you can choose a note. Choose some other notes that you want to be attached to it. So I'm going to hold down Shift. So I've got these 3 selected here. And if I right click, then there is a beaming option. And I can say beam together. You can set that as a shortcut if you want to, if you're doing this a lot, but beam together is a good option. So these 4 here, then you would do the same thing. So you could choose these 4 notes here, and you can right click and say beaming, beam together, and it will beam those together. If you wanted to unbeam something, then you can choose something, and in the beaming there's split beams, make unbeamed, and various other things, so you can make unbeamed. There's also feather beaming options and those kind of things in the same menu. But for just doing a bit of manual beaming, choose the note or notes you want, and then right click, and in the beaming option choose beam together or split or whatever you need from there. Voices. Somebody asked earlier about voices. Sorry, it's scrolled off the top of the list because we've had a lot of comments. Yes, I'm hoping you're still here on the call and you are then here for this answer. So when I am entering this bar, we've got 2 voices, or they might be called layers in some cases, in some software. So I think Finale was layers, Sibelius, they would be voices. We tend to call them voices as well. So to enter these, I'm going to enter the top notes to start off with. So I'm going to, as before, double click down here. I'm going to say 8th note. I'm just going to put these notes in. Now you see the stems are not the right way around, but I'm not worried about that at the moment. Just enter the notes, and then we've got some 16th notes. And then we've got, what did we do? Oh, we've got a dotted. Oh, okay. And then, so I've entered that as a dotted note because it is the length of a dotted quarter note. So that's the quickest way of doing it. I just typed 66 and I got a dotted note. So I've entered that first one. Now the stem directions are not necessarily correct, but that doesn't matter. Now in other software, you commonly have a number of voices available. So for example in Sibelius there are 4 voices that you can access at any time. In Dorico there aren't any voices until you create them, but you only need to create, for each staff you only need to create them once. So what you do is when you have the caret line on here, if you hold down Shift and press V for voice, then when you do that, the first time you press it, it will say plus downstem. So I've now added a voice for this staff here. Now there are an unlimited number of voices that you can create in Dorico, but by default they don't exist. So I've now created one here. So if I press 66 and press G, then it will add a G here. Don't worry about the fact it's tied at the moment. When I enter the next note, it will sort that one out, and it's automatically also flipped the stems, and I've got a second voice underneath. So I've now entered those 2, and I can now enter the next 2 notes. Now if I was to leave note entry mode and then decide I want to come back to this bar, when I double click here, I do not press Shift V because in this staff the new voice already exists. So all I need to do now is just press V to toggle the available voices, and I can now enter notes in either of the available voices that are there. So I move to the downstem voice just by pressing V, and now I can enter those notes, and when I do that, then it will neatly sit underneath, and you see it's also entering the rests that I would need if I didn't complete this bar. You can also use a MIDI keyboard as well, of course. What have we got here? I should have paid attention, shouldn't I? There we go. So now just using V will toggle between the available voices. Now Dorico is fairly resilient about voices. If you accidentally use the wrong voice, then you don't need to worry too much. Also, if you have entered the wrong voice, you can select one or more bars, and if they're selected and you press V, then it will swap the two voices round. So if you've accidentally entered this, it doesn't matter. You can just select the bar, press V, and it will automatically toggle those two voices. There are also options in the voices when you right-click option. You can swap, change voice, swap voice order, that kind of thing, if you needed to change any of the voices. But Dorico is generally very resilient about entering voices, but don't press Shift V more than once, because otherwise you'll end up with multiple voices. If you go to the View menu at the top of the screen, you can also go to Note and Rest Colors, and you can turn on voice colors. So if you prefer viewing the music like this so that you can clearly see which voice something's in, you can do that with Note and Rest Colors. And that's where sometimes we're center file where somebody's pressed Shift V too many times, created lots of extra voices, and you'll have multicolored music because it looks beautiful if you like colors. Because they've done that very often. You only need to press Shift V once to make a voice, and then just press V to toggle between the available voices that are there. And then when you don't want to see the note and rest colors, they won't print unless you specifically choose the option. The note colors won't print, so you can if you want, but by default they don't. And if you go back to note and rest colors, you can go back to none or notes out of range. If you want to see the notes out of range for a particular instrument, you can turn the colors off there. So to change the stem direction, I haven't needed to change the stem direction in this case because using the two voices has automatically done it for me. So the first, the up here, these were automatically, it says an up stem voice. In actual fact, if it gets above the B line, of course, it automatically sorts out the stems. And then when I entered this music, it automatically initially put this bar with stems down, but as soon as I put the other voices in underneath, it automatically flipped the stems. I didn't have to do anything. There is a manual option. If you choose a note and you press F for flip, you can flip manually a stem as well, which is occasionally useful in some cases, but for voices it's just not needed for the way it's doing this. You could choose a note here and you could press V just to change the voice of this one note, and that's now added it to the up stem voice here, and then this down stem voice is underneath. If I put the note and rest colors on to voice colors again, you'll see. So now these are both blue notes and these are the red voice underneath. If I choose this note and I press V on my keyboard, then it will flip it to the down stem voice. It also happens to flip the stem, of course, but it's now in the correct voice underneath. So F is just your general flip something. And we will use that one a bit later as well, but just V to toggle the voices that are available when you need them. Somebody said they're guilty of Shift V times infinity. Yes. Well, you get very colourful looking music, and as I said, Dorico is fairly resilient at it, but it's not going to help in the long run, probably your understanding of how things are working. So, yeah, keep to a minimum number of voices. Actually, in orchestral music as well, you generally don't need to use the voices because Dorico has a condensing feature that does those kind of things for you automatically. So it really is only piano music, guitar music maybe where you'd need to use voices. Even for drum kits, Dorico has a different method for handling drum kits and stem directions automatically, and we will be looking at that one next week. So for all of those kind of things, actually, yeah, you don't need to use voices for that, which is very useful. So I'll move on to copying and moving things. We can move through a few of these sections fairly quickly now. So copying and moving things. If you select a bar, so I'm clicking between the notes and it's selected the bar, then I can press R and it will repeat that whole bar. If I select one note and press R, it will just repeat that one note straight away. I'll just press undo. If I select more than one note and press R, then it will just repeat that straight after. So I'll get an exact copy of that straight after where I was. So R is a useful button for repeat. If I just have a look in my notes, then I've added that, and I'll check all the shortcuts for you in a second. The next option you might want to use is what we call Alt-click to copy and paste. So if you have something selected, so for example, I'm going to select this first bar again. If I hold down Alt or Option if you're on a Mac, and I click underneath down here, then just by holding down Option and clicking here, it's copied and pasted the notes down here. So again, I can choose this bar here. I can just hold down Alt. Now, if you move along the bar slightly, it will take all of these rhythms, and if I go underneath beat 2 and click, then it will move them along to paste underneath beat 2. So you might have to be careful where you click if you're using that method. But Alt-click can be a useful way of copying. You can also do it this way, so I can copy it into this bar, or if I don't want it in that bar, I've just pressed undo, I can Alt-click into the last bar. So I can then say I've got it here, not this one, and this one. So Alt-click can be useful. To select a partial measure, somebody's just asked, I would select a note, and I would normally just hold down Shift and select the last note that you wanted in that selection. There are a couple of other options to select. You can also, if you're using the keyboard and you have a note selected, you can hold down Shift, and then when you use the right arrow, it will extend that selection to the right, or you can go to the left as well, so you can use that. There is an option to drag, so if you click and drag with your mouse, then you can select things this way, but you'll sometimes end up accidentally encapsulating something else you didn't mean, like this one. So I don't use that as a terribly accurate option. You can also deselect things. So if you've got things like this and you don't want this note selected, you can hold down Command or Control and deselect a note. So you can even also deselect things in the middle of a selection. So now if I take this and I copy it down here with Option, I'll just get the bits that I had selected. So there are those kind of options as well if you wanted to. There's also options for a bit more accuracy. For copy and paste, you might also have used the option to select something, press Command C or Control C, and then when you go somewhere else, you can press Control V to paste. You can use that, it just feels a little bit slow sometimes. These shortcuts are all in here, so if you're not, I know I'm going a little bit quickly. So R is repeating things. Alt-click or Option-click actually as well. If you're on a Mac, then it's Option-click. It was copy and paste. Control C to copy, Control V to paste, you can use that one too. There's also this one, which is Alt N and Alt M, which is really quite useful. So I'll show you this one. What you would do here is if you've selected a bar here and you wanted it directly underneath, or let's say you've selected halfway through the bar and you want this copied directly underneath, it's difficult to tell exactly where the beats are in some cases. So to make sure that it's an exact copy underneath, if you hold down Alt or Option and press M for mother, then it will move those to the staff below. So you can now move things directly where you want them to be. So it's not a copy this time, it's a move, but you can move it to the staff below. I said Option or Alt was also your move key with the arrows earlier. So now if you hold down Option, you can move all of those notes to the right, or you can move them all to the left along the rhythm grid. But when you want to move them up and down to other staves, because up and down arrows would just move them diatonically, so you use Alt N to move them up, and you use Alt M for mother to move them down. So that's in that shortcuts text file I've given you, the Word file, so if you want any of those. So it's a very flexible way of saying, I know I put them up here, but actually I want them down here. If this was treble and bass clef of a piano, it's really handy to move notes between the staves sometimes. You may also want cross-staff beaming. So you might want to choose a note and you might want to move it, cross-staff beam it, and that's N and M on their own. But for moving these, actually physically moving them, especially between instruments that are above and below each other, then you can just use Option N and M. And if somebody's wondering why you can't move it down here, it's because this is a new flow. It's an independent section of music. So you can't move it out of its own movement, if you like. But between the instruments in the same system, you can use Alt N and M. Yes, Chip, it is in the notes. Here you go. Alt N, or of course Alt is also Option on a Mac, and N and M to move to those, no problem. So yes, somebody just said it's great for when you've given a flute player a long run with no breath, give half of it to flute 2. Yep, why not? They play that bit, flute 2 plays this bit, they play this bit. Somebody can actually breathe in the gap. So it's a really handy because it's accurately moving it to the correct beat and space. Especially, I suppose, also if you had this, let's say we've got these in the top staff, and you want to move, just a bit of this. Moving these accurately down here is impossible normally, but Alt-M will accurately move them to exactly the correct place in the bar and put all the rests in that you need and leave everything else in here. So it can be a really quick way of accurately moving things into the right bar with those shortcuts. Now, lengthening and shortening note values. If you choose a note, you can change the note value of it by choosing a new note over here. So if you choose a new duration, then that will also change it. But when I'm entering notes, sometimes it isn't a whole note value. There isn't, it's not a whole note. I actually want it to end maybe an eighth note before the end of the bar. So what you would commonly have done in other software is enter a note and then use ties to tie a bunch of notes together. In Dorico, you can do that, but I actually enter ties very rarely. What I do is I choose the note here, and I can, when we were using Option a minute ago to move notes around, if I move this note to the right, then this is still a whole note, but it just displays in different places in the bar with ties. So if I keep moving it to the right along the rhythm grid, it will change to be various different note lengths. Note values effectively with ties. It's the same length. It's always the same length. So you can also then, when you've entered a note like this, you can also lengthen it along the rhythm grid. So this is, again, it's in the shortcuts file. So this is going to be Shift-Alt, or if it's Shift-Option on Mac, and the arrow keys. So Alt was your move key, but Shift will extend and contract it. So Shift and Option will, with the arrow keys, will extend this along the rhythm grid, making that note longer. And if I go left, it will make the note shorter. So when I'm in a bar like this one, and I enter a whole note, D, and then I want it to be just end before the bar, I can do this. And that's a much quicker way of entering, rather than entering a half note tied to a quarter note tied to an eighth note. Or if you have a note that you want to enter and you want it to be just tied into the next bar, then you can extend it, and you can then say that this is now extended to here, but I didn't need to enter the tie or the eighth note. I've just extended the current note duration, which is really, really handy. There's also an option if you want to halve and double things. So I'm going to enter a couple of quarter notes. Let's have a couple of eighth notes. Let's have a couple of a couple of half notes and a couple of eighth notes. So now if I choose a note here, there's also a shortcut. It's in the shortcuts guide. It says it's Command-Shift-Alt for me. So Command-Shift-Alt. If you're on PC, it's Control-Shift-Alt. And if I press the right arrow, it will double the note value. So an eighth note becomes a quarter note, which is more useful if you've got multiple notes selected, because if I select all of these and I use this, it's going to go wrong to start off with, and then I'll explain why. So if I use this shortcut, it extended the first note value and the second one, but it's removed a bunch of the other ones, which is quite annoying. So I don't want to do that. What you want to do is there's an option in Dorico called Insert Mode, which we're going to look at in a minute. And when we use Insert Mode in a minute, we'll then come back and we'll fix this so that it will actually double all of these note values correctly. Somebody's just asked if they can delete voices in the chat. They might be slightly behind us. Yes, you can delete voices, or you can delete notes in individual voices. And if you stop using a voice entirely, if you've deleted all the notes from that voice, and then you save the Dorico file and close it, next time you open the Dorico file, that voice won't be there. So lengthening and shortening notes, I use that one quite a lot, and we're going to be doing some doubling and halving. In fact, let's put these ones down here, and we can then move on to insert mode and come back to these, because there's a neat little link between these two. So insert mode. Now, insert mode, if you're using, for example, Microsoft Word and you had a typo, so you'd missed out a letter or some letters from the middle of a word, then you would just click in the middle of the word and you would type the rest of them, and the notes would move out. Sorry, the notes, the words, the letters would move out of the way to make space for the things you'd added. So effectively, Microsoft Word is always in insert mode. Notation software has historically not been. So if you, for example, we've got bar 1 here, we've got bar 4 here, but we want to enter bars 2 and 3. And this could be a single note or multiple bars, but you want to put something in the middle, basically here. So if you're in Microsoft Word, you would click here, you would start typing the thing you wanted, and it would move everything else along. And so you can do that in Dorico as well. If you press the letter I for insert mode, then on the left-hand side, you'll get this little button lit up for insert mode. And over here you get these extra little chevrons on your on the caret line as well. So now I can input these notes, but these notes will just be pushed along to the end of the bar. So I'm going to enter these notes here. So I'm going to say I want a quarter note and I want an A. You see it's moving those notes along, and I want some eighth notes. And all of these notes that I enter just means it's rewriting these at times, but I will just keep going. And now it's put them in the right place because I've inserted these. If I press delete or backspace, then it would pull them in again. So it gives you the options of when you've made a mistake, you don't have to cut the music out and paste it in another bar. You can just turn on insert mode and insert the thing that you wanted. So that's insert mode when you're using it as a as a kind of compositional tool, or you've made a mistake and you're using it to fix problems that way. Now you can also use insert mode when you're editing things. So now the caret line isn't on. So if I choose this note value here, normally, so I'm going to turn insert mode off. Normally, if I was to choose this note and I was to make it an eighth note, I would get an eighth note and a rest. I'm going to undo that. I'm going to turn insert mode back on again. And then I'm going to choose this note and I'm going to say I'm going to make it into an eighth note. So I'm going to press eighth note again. So it's made it into an eighth note, but it didn't give you a rest. It pulled all of the other notes in instead. So if I take this, this note, and I make this note an eighth note, then it's pulling all of the notes back in again. So it also means we're not destroying the music in quite the same way, or at least we're not removing any of the notes. So here, if I was to do this up here with these, when I tried to double the note values before, the problem was that doubling this one means this one gets destroyed. If I choose all of these here, and I now use the command with insert mode turned on, then I can double the note values. They all doubled and pushed everything else out of the way. And if I chose these ones and I double the note values, then they all become doubled, but it's not affecting anything else. Or if I halve all the note values, then I'm back to where I was. So the shortcuts for those are in the guide, of course. So halving and doubling note lengths, so Control-Shift-Alt on Windows or Command-Shift-Alt on Mac, and you're just using the left and right arrows. But if you use them with insert mode, now this is kind of with great power comes great responsibility, because if you've accidentally got insert mode on, you can accidentally destroy your music later on. So there is also an option to have a stop line. So Option Shift I for insert gives you this stop line, which means that when you're doing things, if I've got some notes over here, they will not be affected by anything I'm doing over here. So with insert mode, if I accidentally change a bunch of these and double them all, or change them, then it doesn't affect anything after the stop line. So it's a useful kind of safety barrier, if you like, with this stop line. You can also drag this stop line around if you want to put it somewhere else. But yes, otherwise the shortcut is Option Shift I, and you can move or turn on and off the stop line if you don't want it. If you accidentally get that stop line, Option Shift I can turn it off for you as well. So that can be a really useful option. We'll also look next week at more options for lyrics and that kind of thing. So my colleague was writing some German lyrics in here. You can press Shift L for lyrics. We'll do more of this next week, and you can type in your lyrics and you can move between all of the. You can add spacebar and melismas and everything else. And we will do a lot more lyrics and things next week. So please join us for session 2 next week. Let's finish off with a few of these sections. These are hopefully relatively quick ones, I think, because most of it's entered for us already. Oh, sorry, was it slightly hiding? Oh, yes, apologies. The keyboard picture was hiding the third bar there over here. Apologies. Hopefully you can see where we were getting to. It's that tricky balance of trying to show you what I'm doing on the keyboard versus is it on the screen. So apologies for that, but hopefully enough of that came across and you can see what we're aiming for now. So in section 21, cutting ties and note values. So here we have tied notes. So if we want to add a tie down here, we've entered these rhythms. Now I often wouldn't enter the rhythms like this. I probably would have just put in a dotted quarter here and a dotted quarter here, and I would have automatically got a tied note. But if you prefer working this method of putting the notes in and then tying them, you can select the note here and just press T for tie, and it will tie those two notes. The same across a bar here. You can press T for tie and tie those two notes, and this one and this one. Now, what I would probably have done in this case, in this bar, if I delete those, is when I would have entered the notes, then I would have pressed 66 for a dotted quarter note and press C again, which would have given me that tie, then press 8th note C, and this one is a dotted quarter over the bar line, so I would just say dotted quarter over the bar line and it would do that for me. So I often don't press T for ties. However, what happens if you want to untie things? So these have ties. You don't want to make it an 8th note because then you lose a note. So you don't want to do that. You just want to untie and get 2 notes back, and the same here and the same here. So what you then do is you press U for untie, and there is a shortcut which is this scissors button over here. So if I choose a note, you can also press this scissors button if you prefer over here, which is kind of like a scissors cut. But the shortcut is U effectively for untie. So I can press U and I can untie notes, which is also very useful. There's also some options down here. So for force duration, so you can see in this bar, this is not the correct rhythm for common time. And when I was entering the notes here, I put in a dotted quarter note and another dotted quarter note, and it gave me the correct rhythm because it's clearly showing me the middle of the bar. If there is, for some reason, a reason that you want to do this, it's not a problem. You can start the carrot line as normal. You can then force the duration of some notes. So you can use this option over here, which is a G clamp, which says force duration. And the shortcut is O, because if you're using this, then this really is, you're overriding things. So, with great power again. So I press O for force duration, the G clamp lights up. So now if I want a dotted quarter note here and I enter that, I will get exactly that. And the next one I normally wouldn't, but if I press C again, I will get exactly a dotted quarter note. Obviously, I don't want that at the end, so I just press 6 for a quarter note and enter C. So a dotted quarter note, 66 or 6 and dot, when I enter that with force duration on, will give me exactly that. If I move over to this next bar, do the same if I do 55, I could get a series of dotted 8th notes, which I normally wouldn't have got. And when you do this, you can also choose a note later, and you can see on the left hand side that you've done the force duration option. So if you press that, or you press the letter O, then it will turn the force duration off so that it will go back to the standard notation. So if you do it by accident, it's easy to undo, and if you want it, then you can use that. I wouldn't jump to that method first, because in many cases you can go to the library menu, you can go to notation options, and you can correctly set the note grouping that you would want from the series of options here, and that will be overall better than in most cases than using force duration. So force duration does exist, but normally it's just for those single cases in a single bar when you want to turn it on and use that and then carry on after that. Yes, I will give you my email address at the end as well. No problem, Nancy. But if you've got an email from me with the Zoom link with the YouTube link to this, then you can also just reply to that email if you wish. Lock duration. Oh, we did this one earlier, so that's handy. We'll just recap lock duration. So I'm going to choose this note here. I'm going to turn on the carrot line. I'm going to press enter. I'm going to press L for lock duration. The shortcut is listed in the shortcuts guide I've given you. And then you just play the notes, and it doesn't matter what the rhythms are now, because all you're doing is just changing the pitch. So I'm not choosing any durations at all. They're all happening automatically based on what's already there, and you can enter anything you like, because all of the notes will change, but you don't have to do anything with the rhythms. And like I said, this is also useful if you've got flute 1 and flute 2 and you want them to be harmonies and things like that. Then you can then choose one of these, and you can just say, enter the new pitches there instead, and because all of the durations are exactly as you want them. So L, or this button over here, is your lock duration to do that kind of method. I feel like my head is about to explode. We're nearly there. Don't panic, but if you like, you can come back to this session. Like I said, it's recorded. Slurs and flipping items. We did a bit of this earlier. See, we're only recapping now. It'll be great. So for entering slurs, I'm going to choose a note here. I'm going to hold down Shift and choose this one here. I'm going to press S for slur. There's also a button over here, which is a slur button. Do not use this as ties. I have seen people occasionally use it as ties. It's not the tie button, but it is the slur button. So you can choose the notes and press S. I can choose this one to here, and I can press S. Now the shortcuts we used for lengthening and shortening notes before, which was Option Shift, you can also use those, and your slurs will lengthen and shorten as well. So if you need to use the same shortcuts, once you've learnt a couple of shortcuts in Dorico, they will apply in many cases. So S will add a slur. If you need to, F will flip a slur. So you can choose a slur and you can flip it. You could also choose the beam of the notes, which selects all the notes, and you can flip the notes. So now we've flipped these notes and the slur can be optionally flipped. So F will flip all sorts of things. Depending on what you choose, you can flip an individual note or notes. You can flip the beams of those, you can flip the stems of those, and you can drag these little drag handles if you prefer with your mouse, and it will extend a slur, or you can use the Option Shift arrow shortcut to use those. So you can then put your slurs and flip them if you need to. Now there are some preferences in Dorico that normally the slurs will be in the right places anyway, so this is normally kind of an override thing if there's a particular case. And if you were doing two voices, enter all the notes into two voices first before you start manually flipping things, because Dorico will still sort a lot of them out for you automatically. You don't need to do it yourself. So yeah, that should be useful. Chip, yeah, bourbon might help. It's getting to that time of day here in the UK, so it's 6 o'clock already. So I'm nearly done. Last couple of bits. Articulations. These articulations, I'm going to select some notes. They're available over here on the left-hand side. We have accents. We've got staccato dots. We've got marcato dots. We've got tenutos. Now on my keyboard, I'm going to show you just on here. On my keyboard, these articulations are to the left of my enter key, because my enter or return key here is a UK one. So these 4 items here are these 4 items on the screen, in the interface. If you're in the US, you might have this kind of enter key, which means your articulations are kind of just slightly over the top, and then your hat accent is here to the left of enter. But these are the shortcut keys for the articulations, so I've put them in that shortcut guide for you. So basically, you can choose some notes, and then you can choose an articulation either on the screen, or you can just press the button on your keyboard. So I can use the right arrow and I can move along and just enter these articulations using these buttons like this. So I've entered a few of these articulations, and there's also these ones which are a lot less common. So this is stressed and unstressed, because it's a smile, because it's unstressed. We're not stressed, it's fine. And staccatissimo and staccato tenuto. But you can also do, if you've entered all of the articulations once, let me just remove a bunch of these articulations for a minute. There we go. You can also select another passage of music like these. You can press copy. And then if you've got some other notes, let's just prove it by making them all into other notes, Option down. And now, instead of pasting them in, because if I paste, I'll get all the same notes again. There's an option when you right-click Paste Special, or if you edit Paste Special, there is an option for pasting just the articulations. So it's pasted in all of the correct articulations underneath all of the notes. So paste articulations is also very useful. So if you need it, you can use that option too. Rhythmic notation. If you needed to enter rhythm slashes like this, how about bowing? Yes, we can do. Yes, there are bowing options. They're over here in this playing techniques panel. In the string section, there are bowing options, so you can use those ones as well. And there are shortcuts for those if you want them as well. Rhythmic notation and slash notation, and then we'll do bar repeats, and we're done. So rhythmic notation, if you want to enter this kind of rhythm, when you start the caret in Dorico, this is actually a different voice, effectively. So we looked at voices in one of the earlier sections, and we pressed Shift V to make a voice. And in the document I've given you with all the shortcuts, it says you use Shift Alt V, or Option, of course, if you're on a Mac. And that creates a slash voice. You see, this is a slash voice plus a slash. So now I can just enter the rhythm. It doesn't matter which pitch I press on the MIDI keyboard or on this keyboard. It doesn't matter, because it's a slash voice. It will always be in the middle, and it will always have that slash note head. So now I can just choose any rhythm any pitch I like, and I can just enter the rhythm. I can still use the space bar to move as I would have before, and it doesn't matter what the pitch is because it will enter that as a slash voice. If I want to go back to standard notes, I can just press V and it will go back to standard notes, and now V will go to my slash voice. So exactly the same as when we did voices earlier with upstem and downstem. It's just that now one of those voices is rhythmic notation. So that's one option for rhythmic notation in here. You also, when you've got this kind of option, you're not actually displaying the rhythms. You just want to put some slashes in like this. You can select one or more bars, hold down Shift and select one or more bars. And if you press Shift R for the repeats popover, you can literally just type the word slash, and that will give you a slash region. You can also use these little drag handles at the end as before, so you can make them longer and shorter, these regions. They're green just to show you that they're not standard notes, it's a slash region. You can use the same shortcuts we were using for notes earlier, so it's Option Shift, left and right arrows to extend and contract them. And you'll also find, and we will use this again next week as well, if you enter some notes, so I'm on the wrong voice here, I'm going to press V. If you've entered some notes in here, and then if you've put a slash over the top of them like this, then the notes will still play underneath. So if you need to hide them under a solo, if you need to then display the chord symbols, that kind of thing, then you can do that. So that was, whether the notes are there or not, it doesn't matter, but select the bars, Shift R for the repeats popover, and type the word slash, and you'll get a slash region like that. Now for bar repeats, you don't need to put the notes in underneath. I've seen a couple of cases of people doing this, putting the notes in underneath and then adding these symbols. That's not necessary in Dorico. So you can select these bars. If I select one bar and use Shift R again, but this time say % in here, then Dorico will give me a repeat bar option here. That will automatically play back. You do not need to put the notes in underneath. It will automatically play back just because that symbol's there. And if you drag this and make it longer, Dorico will add the number above automatically. You can turn it off, but it will add it automatically by default. And you will then get the playback being correct for all of these bars here. If you've got a 2-bar repeat like this, just select both bars, Shift R again, and because it's a 2-bar, you say you want the %, but you want 2. So it's %2, and that gives you a 2-bar. These are items that you can copy and paste, so I can Alt-click and copy and paste them. I can also, let me just delete those again. So I'm just going to click on them and press delete. I can select all 4 bars, and I can do Shift R, and I can do %4. Now this doesn't make a lot of sense because the 4 previous bars aren't the same, but if you need this for some music, then you can do that. So Shift R for the repeats popover, and then generally things like %2, and that will give you the bar repeats option. All of these are also in the shortcuts information I've given you. So Shift Alt V was the slash voices, V to toggle the available voices. It's exactly the same as when we did voices in the earlier section. Shift R and type slash, because that will give you the slash voice, the slash region. And also in the Shift R popover, you can do %, %2 or %4 to get those bar repeat symbols. Rhythmic cues above slashes, yes, you can do that. We have a specific cues feature. I won't do that today, but there is a specific cues feature, so you don't have to write them. Basically, if your brass parts, your trumpet part already has the right rhythms, you just add the cue automatically from the trumpet part into the drums. That's no problem at all. So I think probably that's a couple of hours now, so thank you for sticking with us. Like I said, if you needed to come back and watch this later, no problem whatsoever. You can recap this as many times as you like. This exact same link that you're viewing this on now, this session will be available. Also on the session materials page, so if you're wanting to download the files from the session materials that I've just put in the link, you can not only download the files to these, but also underneath the session recordings. Today is Wednesday the 24th September, so that will open this YouTube link and you can watch this session. Pause it, watch it double speed if you want, whatever you need to do, but I think familiarity of doing these things in these little blocks hopefully will make it much more obvious, and you'll start to go, oh yes, that shortcut's very similar to this one, and moving notes, it's all the same, so those kind of things. But just repeating those kind of things. Don't start with a big project in Dorico and try and muddle your way through it, because you'll get stuck. There is, like I said, there is also the Getting Started guide. So if you want a guided project to go through, then there are two options. You can go to, I'll put this in the chat, bear with me, dorico.com/getting started. I'll just put this in the chat. And there is a first steps guide here. And the first steps guide is a lesson you can go through. Or this time next week, we will be doing session 2. And session 2, there are some other files we can download for this one. And you will be able to go through that one, and we'll be doing some little arrangements that you can do. So it'll be building on all of these skills, your note input options. You'll have hopefully by next week kind of chosen your favorite, note input kind of options. We'll also be adding lyrics and key signatures and time signatures, and all the things that you might need to build up a couple of different arrangements of things, and some chord symbols, and all sorts of things. But yes, so we'll be doing that in the next session as well. So you can join us here on this YouTube link. And we'll link to all of the other sessions on there, but it will be the same time next week, whatever that was in your time zone. If you want to register for next week's, wherever you registered previously, which I believe was on Eventbrite, or if you want to go to our blog, so blog.dorico.com, then on our blog we have an article down here about these masterclasses, and all of the links are also available in here, so I'll put this in the chat as well. And the links and details are in here. These links, I'm going to update them because some of these are going to Eventbrite, and we can just put some of the YouTube links in. But yeah, they will all be there as well. So it'll be the same time. So whatever time it was in your time zone today, it'll be the same time next week. So Wednesday, it will actually even be October at that point. Wow. So yes, we will be making some arrangements and adding all sorts of other things for your projects. So please join us again for that session. If there are any questions in the chat before we sign off today, let me know in the next couple of minutes. I'm also just going to put in here an email address in the chat, which is discoverdorico@steinberg.de. You can email me on that one, or if I'd already emailed you the link to this session, you can just reply if you want to, and that comes to me as well. And then, yes, if you've got any questions, then yes, please let me know. If there's any questions in the chat in the meantime, let me just see. I don't think there's anything we've missed. I think we're okay so far. I'll keep an eye on the live chat just as we finish as well, so if there is anything, then please do let me know. And yes, otherwise, thank you for joining, and hopefully I will see you in the session next week as well. Next week is session 2. There are 2 more sessions after that as well, so we will then go on to look at layout type options, and then we'll also look at more playback options and also importing your files. So when you want to import finale files, for example, or Sibelius files, we'll import them via Music XML and look at some of those options and what you might want to do and that kind of thing. So all of that will be in 2 future sessions. They're all on Wednesdays from now on. So if it says it's sold out, then I will be adding more tickets to the Eventbrite option, don't worry, and it will just be available on our YouTube channel, so youtube.com/Dorico. They'll be available as live streams on there at the same time anyway, but I will add more tickets to the Eventbrite if that's also sold out, so that you can be reminded via that system as well. But on our channel, on the YouTube channel, you can click on underneath this video, there's a little bell icon, and you can subscribe if you want to, and then you'll find out also about any of the future sessions. We're also running these sessions on some Saturdays, not this coming Saturday, but 2 of them we've already run, so they're also already available, and then we're also running 2 for future sessions, so you would also get notified about any of those. So if this time doesn't suit you next week, then there are other options as well. So thank you. Somebody else has just subscribed, so thank you very much. So thank you for joining, and I will see you next time, probably next week. Thank you. Bye.